We are about to get freaky again. Let's talk about Freakier Friday.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. Today, we're here to discuss Freakier Friday. But before we get into that, Daniel, do you have anything that the people should be watching this week?
Every summer, I go visit family in Germany, which means I watch a whole bunch of movies about Nazis. So I've got some to recommend this time again. My recommendation this time is Before the Fall, also known as Napola, which is a 2004 historical drama from Germany. So the Napola were kind of Nazi prep schools, where essentially they kind of started out as private schools and then turned into a recruitment pipeline for the Nazi leadership. Especially towards the end of the war, this was where they were kind of training the next generation of leadership of the Nazi movement, right? Which obviously never went anywhere, but that was the goal of the program, and that is what the students of these schools thought they were doing. And so this movie kind of dramatizes these schools, and they follow a 15, 16-year-old boy named Friedrich, who in 1942 is kind of recruited into one of these prep schools, essentially on a boxing scholarship, where he's this boxing prodigy, and he kind of grew up in Nazi Germany, and he went through like all the indoctrination and all of that, but he's not fully bought into the belief system and the ideology. He's just a kid who wants to box, and his opportunity for having a boxing career is to join the boxing team of this elite school that is very prestigious, it's very difficult to get into. So he kind of joins the school, and we kind of follow his journey through this program where he becomes indoctrinated into kind of the Nazi ideology, and he makes friends, and some of them are really committed to the cause and others aren't. And it's kind of like a tapestry of kind of fates of these students at these schools. And then various things happen, the kinds of things that students in these schools would have gone through in the later years of the war, essentially. It's kind of using these different characters to kind of depict different angles of what it was like to live in this regime at the time. It's a very smart drama. It's really well written. It's got good characters. It's got a lot of moments that kind of give you a glimpse into what life was like in this kind of society and culture, and does so from different points of view, and it does so in a pretty matter-of-fact way where it just shows you things and lets you make up your mind about it. So if you want to get kind of a glimpse into what that was like, you could do a lot worse than watching Before the Fall.
No, it sounds very interesting for sure. Definitely the aspect of seeing, and I think I always have an interest in seeing in these like big cultural events, how did people like react? What was like the stories of some of the more, common folk in those situations that were just trying to get by or just trying to live their lives while everything was unfolding. So I think on that element, it sounds quite interesting, especially with, how the other characters support the story and the way that it's told and the perspectives, etc. So yeah, it definitely sounds of interest.
Yeah, and it also kind of gives you kind of it cuts a little bit deeper than when you watch like an American movie about World War II. The Nazis are just the enemy soldiers, and you don't really see the inner workings of the ideology and how the society worked. And I think that's interesting by itself. All right, what's the best thing you saw?
So I will give it to Peacemaker season 2, episode 1, just because I haven't watched much else since then. And if you haven't checked out Peacemaker, he was originally in the Suicide Squad, done by James Gunn, great character in that. And then surprisingly, probably one of the best comic book TV shows out there. It will in season 1. I thought they really, added a lot of depth and, really fleshed out his character quite in there. And, John Cena just gave an all-round great performance for Peacemaker to a point where he's showing up in Superman movies, in cameos and stuff like that. And he's, becoming more and more recognizable. But I watched first episode of season 2. And I think it picks back up from where it left off in season 1. I think quite interesting, especially now that they've shifted it to the DCU and how they've incorporated it into that particular universe and how they've retconned a few things. It's an interesting story, and it seems that it's going to go in some interesting places, and it's going to get a little bit wacky and a little bit weird with all the different different travels between dimensions and portal travel and stuff like that. So one that I'm kind of keen to see how it develops across season two, and how I think this was dubbed as playing a significant role in shaping the DCU this particular series. So quite interesting to see how it does that, and how it does it compared to what the Marvel shows did for the MCU.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those weird hybrids, right? Where it's one of the few things that's carrying over from the old DCU, right? Does that get awkward at all, or does it feel like a fit?
I think for sure the season one, whilst it was set in the DCEU, most of the tie-ins were just like references and stuff like that. And obviously, you had that big scene at the end of season one where the Justice League show up and they make a few jokes, but they quite easily retcon that and take out the Justice League and plug in Superman, Supergirl, and the Justice Gang into that scene and just completely retcon it 100%. So I think on that element it's fine. I think one thing that was actually quite interesting was, again, having seen Superman and how wholesome he is just how crazy they get in this particular in this particular show in episode one, where you have a full blown orgy happening in episode one, and it's quite graphic in going on. And I think I support it in the sense that it's kind of showing how James Gunn envisions his world, where there's there's different pockets and there's different stuff happening across the universe, and not everything has to be one tone, not everything has to be of a formula. And I think it gives people a lot more, or it gives directors and writers a lot more creative freedom and a lot more flexibility in the stories that they're able to tell, and to know how they're able to bring certain characters to life, because they're able to just be a little bit more free. So seeing that, I was a bit shocked, but I was like, I'm happy to see it, because we're not playing within the books and we can push the boundaries in what we're trying to do, and not everything's going to be the same.
I'll reserve judgment on the DCU for a while, see how it plays out. But it does seem like it's not as streamlined as the MCU was. That's probably a good thing.
But yeah, main event time. Freakier Friday. Dan, do you want to give the people a bit of a synopsis as to what the movie is?
So, Freakier Friday is the sequel to the 2003 Freaky Friday, and picks up 22 or so years later, in which the characters from the first movie have kind of gone on and founded their families. There's Anna, who was the daughter in the first one, is now the mom. She's got a daughter. She's about to get married to this British guy who brings his own daughter into the family. And then you've got the grandmother, Tess, and those four essentially don't get along. They're not on the same page about being a family and how they want to live as a family. During the rehearsal dinner for Anna's wedding, they switch bodies. The mom and the grandmother kind of switch into the bodies of the daughters, and the daughters switch into the bodies of the mom and the grandma. And then they kind of have to live a day in each other's shoes, and have to learn to see things from each other's point of view in order to break the curse, and wacky hijinks ensue. So, what did we think of Freakier Friday?
I don't know whether this was punishment. I don't know whose idea was it to do this movie,
It was
just mainly
mine.
because, yeah, I think you were probably I don't know a bit annoyed after our last review or so. I don't know, but it felt like
It's
punishment.
so. In my defense, it was either that or our K-pop Demon Hunters.
So I was in a bit of a lose-lose situation. It seems, but
I
it
actually
was.
actually quite have liked the first one. It's not great, but it's watchable. So,
Mhm.
what's your first of all? Did you see the first one, and what was your takeaway from this one?
I've seen the first one a very very long time ago, back in the 2000s. So it's not one that was fresh in my mind. But I think it was clear that I wasn't the target audience for this particular movie, just kind of based on the way that the story unfolded, based on, how things were portrayed at certain times. And again, it had some of that Disney camp that I remember from, back in my days when I used to watch Disney and used to watch some of the shows back then, things like High School Musical and stuff like that. Yeah, it had some of that level of drama towards it, where it's like a bit like over the top with the dramatics of it. I think I was like kind of just like sat there, just like hating the whole experience, and it didn't help that like the cinema was just like filled with a bunch of kids and families and stuff like that. I just felt so out of place. It was interesting in certain points where they had to understand each other's perspectives and understand, each other's lives and what they go through. And, sometimes you don't see how the sacrifices and stuff like that from other people that in your family and stuff like that. So I think on that element, yeah, cool. But I don't know. I was just like really sat there, just kind of waiting for the movie to end, really and truthfully.
Yeah, to say that this is not like we're not the target audience of this is an understatement. I actually kind of like the one from the 70s or 80s, and then I like the one from 2003 just fine. So I kind of walked into this one with open eyes, saying, okay, this is probably not going to be my favorite thing, but I could get on board with some silly fun. This is a formula that kind of lends itself to hilarious misunderstandings and awkward situations and all of that. There's certainly plenty of awkwardness in this, but I kind of cringed my way through the movie most of the time. And I think this movie is a lot more awkward than it needs to be, and it's a lot clumsier than it needs to be. And I think it could have benefited from just a little bit more polish in terms of figuring out which scenes and which ideas are important and how to get the basic idea across. And while this, ultimately, what a Freaky Friday movie tries to do is to put people into each other's shoes, and they have to kind of develop empathy for each other in order to return to the status quo. And that is what happened in the previous movies. And that is what happens here. But it's a lot more roundabout and a lot more awkward and a lot more grating than it needs to be, I think. I think this movie is missing kind of an emotional core where we actually care about the big insight, the big lesson that people learn. And here it's kind of, I kind of was kind of there like 10 minutes into the movie and then spent like 90 minutes waiting for the characters to catch up. And that is not fun. The thing that they need to learn is so obvious, and they don't learn it in interesting ways. And that is why I didn't end up enjoying it. I was totally on board with some, Disney kitsch kind of along the similar to what you were saying, and this is definitely what this is. And I was kind of on board with some like 90s style to early 2000s style, kitsch in that sense. There was plenty of that, but very little heart. And I think that is the reason why I didn't really end up enjoying this one, and which is why I think this is much weaker than the first one. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you raised there about this movie not having enough heart to carry it through. I think it was there for me in certain moments of the movie, but it wasn't a constant. And I think the moments were quite few and far. But, why do you feel like it was missing for you?
If you take this movie and the first one, there's like a 3-part structure to it. The first part is set up, right, where we see the status quo, we see the grievance, we see why these characters are at each other's throats. And then we have the switch, where through some magical means they swap bodies. And then the second part is about half an hour of cringe, where people just do awkward things, where they kind of cause problems for the other person by acting in inappropriate ways. And then the third part is them realizing what they need to do and then trying to bring about the change that will fulfill the requirements of the curse, and that will swap them back. In the first movie, I'm actually blanking on it a little bit now, but I think it was kind of just a general empathy for each other's perspective, and that culminated in Tess agreeing to play in the rock band. I think there was like a rehearsal dinner for the wedding, and then Tess had to sneak away to play in this rock band, which was Anna's big ambition, but she couldn't play the guitar, and so they had to work together, where Tess had to be present and Anna had to play the guitar, and together they fulfilled this, and by doing so, they showed empathy and understanding for each other. And that is what broke the curse. Right? So like very broadly, right? It's not a full summary of the first movie, but like that is kind of how that ended. And this kind of has the setup, right, where the wedding is coming up, and you've got Lily and Eric, who are the two English people who are marrying into this family. Anna's and Eric's plan is to move to London after the wedding, and so Anna's daughter Harper does not want to leave, and Lily doesn't want to be in the family, and so like they hit each other and are at each other's throats and so on, right? And then the big switch happens, and then we have at least 40 minutes of people just like creating cringy moments, right, where they kind of try to undermine each other's lives so that the wedding doesn't happen, at least on the part of the daughters. And then kind of at the end there's this heartfelt reconciliation, but there isn't really there's no heart in it at that point, right? Like where I didn't feel like they do learn a lesson, they go through the steps, but I didn't feel like there was like genuine reflection, and there wasn't like any kind of real humanity in it. It felt obligatory, and it felt like this has to happen so that the movie can end. But I didn't really feel to me like there was really something where these characters really learn a lesson and really care and really try to do better and really try to make amends for what they've been doing. Like they go through the steps, right? And like if you really like this movie and you're listening to this, you can point to specific events and specific lines where they do exactly that. But I just didn't feel it. I didn't believe it that they were doing this. It felt like the script told them to. And I think that is really what was missing.
I think for me, anyways, I think the heart in this movie, again, where I say it was like few and far, it was a little bit stronger on Harper and is it Emma? Was Harper and Anna's relationship, and it was mainly when Harper was learning things about her mother and like learning things about what her mother sacrificed. You know, things like how she gave up her music career, or gave up recording music because she had a daughter, or hearing about certain like plans like that she was like learning to surf and stuff like that for a daughter to kind of like surprise her and stuff like that. I felt like that's where there was like good heart in the movie, but like you said, I just kind of didn't like the way that everything was resolved in this. It kind of just felt, especially on like someone like Lily's part, where it was like, oh, I've seen my dad upset, and that's gonna make me completely like flip and do a 180. I don't think they executed that one really well, or sort of any of the others really, really and truthfully. I don't know. I feel like I was too checked out to really get completely emotionally involved in this movie, to be honest. So I think that the movie had an uphill battle with me from the get go, and it just kind of didn't take me to where it needed to.
Yeah, the whole thing is certainly an exercise in ice skating uphill, but I think there's two big problems with it. Well, like why I ended up not caring. The first one is that everything is so ridiculous and so cringy in the second part, right, where they kind of live in each other's bodies, and they're not even trying to be believable at all, right? At that point, everything is a farce, and I simply don't believe that anything is real and these are real people and so on, right?
You know, one other thing actually in terms of the believability that was completely throwing me for a loop the whole movie was this whole idea that they were planning to move back to London, because the father seemed like he'd just got there. The daughter was new in the school. He'd just opened up a restaurant, I believe, and their idea was to get married and go back to London. I don't know whether I missed an explanation as to why they were deciding to do that in the movie, but it felt like it just didn't make sense that this whole they've just moved to America. He just opened up a restaurant, but they're gonna get married and move to London. And I don't know. I was completely confused by that. And again, like you said, it takes away from the believability of it, and this whole idea of they just met 6 months later, they're gonna get married as well. I was just like, okay, I guess some people can do that, but I was just a little bit confused by that. And I felt like the movie probably could have had a different starting point or a different introduction to these characters and to these conflicts. It could have been a situation where the father was already there, and then for whatever reason, like, you know, of course the daughter's mother had died, but it could have been that she had to move to America because of a situation, had to come live with her father, and like I don't know, like maybe that doesn't work either. But the sort of onboarding point of the movie just left me scratching my head, and it never resolved that for me at all at any point in the movie.
There's a few things here. First of all, this, like whenever I see a movie where the big conflict is teenager doesn't want to move. Like I moved a bunch of times as a child and as a teenager, and it's a big disruption to your life, but in the end you get used to it. Like at 15, 16, you can just make new friends. and you can live anywhere basically. And so whenever like a movie presents this as this big intractable problem and conflict, and the parents aren't just saying, no, actually I'm the adult, I'm making this decision, we're doing this, and the child gets over it in 2 weeks, that just is not believable to me. That is at odds with my experience, not just mine, but lots of people that I've known. So like that's just one part of it. The other one is that everything feels so plastic and insincere and stilted. Like the fact that everybody talks like a therapist. Like I understand that Tess is a therapist, but that doesn't mean that the entire family has to talk this way. And it's just their exchanges are not, that they don't feel real. And I'm sure there are people who talk like this, but like it's just one more layer of, this is a comedy skit, this is not something that's real or with real humanity in it. I don't know, like there's just a whole bunch of different layers. And then like you said, like the conflict is like the reason for them wanting to move to London. I think there might have been a line, but I don't remember off the top of my head what it was, because they have a life in California. Like none of them have to leave, they would have to all have to start over. Like Anna does not have a career in London, you know what I mean? Like it's unclear why they're doing this. And I feel like if I watched this again, there would be a line that says, okay, that's why. But it did not stick in my mind why they had to do this. And if they are going to do this, the parents can just decide, and the kids will get over it. So that was just an additional way in which I didn't care. Another layer that kind of made me not care is this whole idea that at no point, and the first movie did this too, is where once the switch happens, none of them try to behave like the other person. There could be a lot of comedy in them trying to act like the other person and failing, maybe because they're not very good at it, or because they have an incorrect image of what the other person is like. Like the first movie had this whole thing about how Tess thinks being a high schooler is easy, and Anna thinks Tess's job is bullshit. And so they both underestimate how difficult it is to be in each other's shoes, and then they learn this lesson and adjust accordingly. And then in the end, these lessons come to play when they have to jump through the hoop to break the curse. And here I didn't feel that was the case. It, like, especially since Harper and Lily are basically going on a shopping spree. You know, like they get to drive cars and they get to drink alcohol, and Tess and Anna get to eat junk food and have the metabolism of 16-year-olds. Like it does not seem like a punishment, right? Like there's very little in this, in this, where they struggle because of the body they're in, right? They both have, like, now, you know, like Tess and Anna try to break the curse, and Harper and Lily try to make the wedding fail, but that's kind of it as far as conflict is concerned, right? Like they don't really have a hard time in each other's shoes, and as a result they don't really learn the lessons. And then the thing that actually gets them to change their mind is just them overhearing a conversation. Specifically, Lily, I think both Harper and Lily hear things about their respective parents that they normally wouldn't have heard, and that changes their perspective. But it's just very easy and very quick, right? There's no struggle to overcome, there's no obstacle, there's no growth. It's just, oh, if you put it that way, I guess I'll completely rethink my life. You know what I mean?
Is the problem with that the fact that they had four people included in the swap, which meant that there was too many perspectives, and it meant that, you know, you had to pair the characters together. So, for example, like Tessa and Anna had to do so many scenes together where it kind of seems like their lives are completely separate. They're not sort of codependent, and it's more Tessa supporting Anna because Anna's got a career going for her, which demands a lot of her time and stuff like that. But in this, you're having to pair them together, so they're not actually living the lives that they would actually have to. Apart from like Anna has to go to work, and like we kind of see her going through her stuff. And the only thing that we see with Tess is like maybe the pickleball game, which ends up winning somehow or whatever. But it's like, okay, that's
Which
like
is still a comedy
that was a
scene.
bit, yeah, which yeah, again played for laughs and doesn't quite make sense. I mean, the ones that doesn't make sense are the two daughters, because they actually go to the same school, they are in the same lab classes, etc., where you can actually have them together, but still living the lives of some of the other people. But yeah, it seems like a curse of the sequel, or the curse of the sequel is that they kind of have to go bigger and better than what they did before. But in doing so, it takes away from some of those angles of, and maybe they didn't want to sort of lean into, like, you know, living for each other's lives. Maybe it was more cross-generational this time in terms of, one, like appreciating your youth a little bit more with sort of the old people swapping into the daughters, where they're appreciating the youth a little bit more, appreciating some of the stuff that they weren't able to do anymore, which is a little bit shallow if you ask me. But I mean, I guess even saying that, like them sort of kind of like understanding aging and stuff like that, it just all wasn't done well either way. So I don't really know what they were trying to go for. To me, it felt like these are things that, because it's a bit of a family movie, these are things that people can relate to or people will be able to see in their lives somehow. And I felt like it was kind of like a bit of a checkbox of different things that you may have experienced or may know someone that has experienced it in their lives. And it's like, oh, like the whole thing with like the knees and stuff like that, or like not being able to see like sugar and stuff like that anymore and whatever, like used to and whatever. It's just kind of, here's some relatable things in this movie without it really making sense for the story that's being told.
There's a few things there. It being 4 people certainly makes the movie more crowded, and it makes it more complex. And I think a really good script could have juggled all of that, right? These 4 perspectives that kind of inform each other, and there's more moving parts. And so when it all comes together, it's more impressive and more interesting. And then this thing about the generational aspect, now we have 3 generations going on, right? Like you said, like there's stuff in there, right? Especially Lily and Tess's body. First of all, her being in her step-grandmother's shoes already strains a little bit the usefulness of the lesson, right? Like it's like they've not known each other for very long, and they don't actually have to get along. Like I had a step-grandmother, and she was a nice enough person, but had we not liked each other, nothing bad would have happened. You know what I mean? Like there's no pressure for Tess and Lily to get along, and it's a little bit. And the fact that it's treated as identical to Anna and Harper, I think, is stilted and does not ring true. It kind of ties into what you were saying as well, that all of it is so surface level, because whenever Lily remarks on what it's like to be old, it's just a line, right? It's not a character moment. It's not a conflict. It's not something she has to overcome. Most of the time it's played for comedy. So I never cared about any of it. And it's also very obvious, right? Like if you were in like a 70-year-old body, like overnight, going from 16, of course you notice that, you're not, everything she observes on is very obvious. Like if you give me 5 minutes, he can come up with a list of things, and it would probably be what they mention in this movie, right? Like there's nothing where I said, oh yeah, I had considered that, or that's a good point, or like if you put it that way, like this movie doesn't necessarily have to teach me lessons, but the fact that it doesn't even come close to trying, I think makes it even weaker. I think all of these are aspects to why this feels hollow, I think.
And like you were saying about like the grammar and stuff, it's just like obvious stuff. Like you're in the supermarket, and you're in the drugstore, and you're seeing things like adult nappies and stuff like that. It's like, just, again, kind of all played for laughs and nothing really that serious in there, which is just a bit whatever.
Give Lily a heart attack. Just make her, or like something like that, right? Or I don't know what, or like actually make her fall and maybe not break her hip, but you know what I mean? Like an actual consequence, because she didn't adjust to her new environment, and she doesn't know what it feels like to be 70. Like, no, don't make all of it a joke.
Yeah, no, I agree.
That kind of leads into the next aspect of it, which is that there's not very much creativity going on here, right? So one of the cringiest scenes where I kind of dislocated an eye rolling because I was rolling it so hard was when Harper in Anna's body tries to flirt with, is it Jake, the guy from the first movie, so that he gets in between Anna and Eric, which will break up the wedding, right? And apparently the 16-year-old girl does not know how to flirt, has never done it, has never considered it. You know what I mean? Like it was so cartoonish and so over the top, where Lily kind of coaches Harper how to flirt, and she does it so poorly. Like, I could do a better job. Like, make me hit on a 50-year-old guy, and I do a better job than what Harper did in that scene. And that kind of is kind of like the worst example of something that spreads through the entire movie, where people are so bad at walking in each other's shoes that it's just purely comedic. There's no pathos to it. There's no tragedy to it. There's no, like, these are all things that could be there, right? Like where you really try to act like the other person and you can't because it turns out you don't know them as well as you thought, or you had them wrong all along, right? But you have a motivation for wanting to get it right and you can't, and that on some level is drama and tragedy. Instead, again, it's all comedy, and there's like pretty much every scene is like this. But the flirting scene is kind of the most extreme, where they play it so over the top and so cartoonish, and it's also so unbelievable that I basically at
And
that
it's
point
not.
just said, "Well, if you're not gonna care, I'm not gonna either."
The worst thing is it's not even funny, and that's like the biggest crime of any comedy. It's not being funny. Again, like you say, like who are you trying to please for it? Again, this is like family movie. There were no kids laughing at it. There were no kids laughing at all throughout any of this movie. But the kids are not going to find it funny. I don't think the women are going to find it funny because it's like you said, it's not relatable. Like a 16-year-old would know how to flirt, would know how to kind of talk to someone of the opposite sex. Obviously, a grown woman would know how to do it as well. So I don't know where they would find the humor in kind of being over the top and like being that bad at flirting, and then that whole whipping the hair scene and just like being just like outright with it. Who does that? Like it's just so far fetched. Like who does that? Please, find someone that whilst you're having a conversation, they're just whipping their hair back and forth in front of your face that dramatically. It's just not funny at all.
I think that is a place where deadpan would really have worked wonders. Because if she actually tries and the comedy comes from how inept she is about it, that could be funny. Like that scene could, like that. The reason I gave that as my example is not just because it's so over the top, but also because you can imagine a way to make that work. Like you can imagine a way where she's simply clumsy about it, and there might be like generational differences where Gen Z flirts differently than Gen X or something like that. Maybe, I don't know. Like I'm sure there's something there if you really brainstorm it. The people in my theater did find it funny. They did laugh out loud at this stuff. So I guess it was good enough. I just didn't find it funny, and I think the main reason is because it wasn't clever and wasn't trying to be clever. I think that's the biggest issue with it. Another aspect is that how little they acknowledge the first movie. So they do acknowledge it, right? Like Tess and Anna remember the events, but it basically just means they adjust to it quicker than the girls do, and they explain to them what they need to do. And after that, it doesn't matter again in the story. And I feel like there was an opportunity here to try to outsmart the plot structure, where because this is the second time this has happened, even it was over 20 years ago, it was still probably one of the most momentous experiences in their lives, right? Because no matter what else has been happening, you don't forget that kind of experience. And so when it happens again, like it should influence kind of their behavior, right? And it doesn't really, right? Like the overall structure is still the same, right? They figure out what they need to do and they try to bring about, like, try to fulfill like the condition to switch back. But if this was the first time this happened, the plot would unfold exactly the same way. So at no point, and I'm not even sure how you would do this exactly, but it must be possible to create some scenes where comedy comes from them knowing what's going on, right? Like and just acting differently and not being as surprised by it and just having their act together or at least remarking on it. Like I feel like even when Tess and Anna are amongst themselves, nobody else is listening, and they talk to each other, they don't talk about how, oh, this like they do say a little bit, oh, this is what it feels like to be 16 again and whatever. But there's nothing that happens because they are doing this for the second time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the only thing I can think of is when it first happens and they think they know the rules of it, so they try to show fake empathy in case whatever entity is listening to it, but that doesn't work. But yeah, I think you're right. It's not like there's any learnings from, and I don't know the first movie that well. I know you watched it, so not too long before to not watching this one, so you have a better memory of it than I do. But yeah, again, like when you've been through an experience, it should feed into the next time it happens again, and you should react to it differently. You should have some type of like, so I don't know, some type of like experience in dealing with it, or whatever that shapes how you sort of deal with it then. But yeah, it was a little bit lacking.
And there is a scene where Harper and Lily essentially just run into each other, in the hopes of triggering the switch again. And that is what Tess and Anna did in the first movie. And they just say, no, we tried that, doesn't work. Try something else. That's pretty much it. Also, when they are with the psychic, Madame Jen, who was also extremely aggravating. But when she starts with her ominous, actually, I'm not like she does do the spell towards Tess and Anna, right? It's not the girls, right? Am I remembering correctly?
No, it's to the girls.
Ah, okay, so that
I
explains
think,
why.
yeah, I think that first they have like an ominous conversation about something like the lifelines have crossed between Tess and Anna, but then the spell actually happens between the two daughters.
Yeah, what I was trying to get at is if you are so the first time this happened, it was kind of I'm not quick to call like cultural appropriation and stuff like this, but the first movie it was like the mystical Chinese magic. It happened through a fortune cookie and stuff like that, and that was a little bit awkward when I watched that again. And here they made it very clear that this is like not this is like culturally neutral, and kind of Madame Jen is very much like a con artist and kind of does it by accident. But when Madame Jen says something about like, oh, your lifelines have crossed, shouldn't Tess and Anna kind of react to it a little bit more overtly, as in, no, we're not doing this again. Whatever you're doing, we've done this before. You know what I mean? I feel like there should have been something like more awareness, something like that. I can't say I was looking forward to this movie. This is definitely not gonna be anywhere on my top 3 movies of the year, no matter what. But I can still get enjoyment out of this kind of movie. I kind of like the 80s. I don't even know what the name for it is, but like in the 80s specifically, there was like this miracle story kind of template, right? Where a magical thing happens and then a character is kind of thrown into an impossible situation. And Freaky Friday is that, right? Like for some reason, mother and daughter switch places and then the plot happens. You know what I mean? Like this that kind of story I've seen many times. I can get enjoyment out of it. I can get on board with that. I can even get on board with it being just an outright comedy. It's just not smart enough. It doesn't try anything. Like when you do this for the first time, the novelty of it is still like has value by itself, right? But if you do it again, I think you have to develop it a little bit and you have to do something interesting with it. And simply doing it with 4 people instead of 2 is not enough. That just makes it more complicated and that makes it harder for you in terms of constructing a story that's satisfying and that gets to all the different beats. But what was needed here is to kind of take a next step just in terms of the concept, not the complexity, not the number of people, but the concept of it, where you take it somewhere like a step further. And I'm not sure what that should have been, and I don't have like a ready-made pitch for what it should have been. But I think that is why it fell so flat for me, is because I was kind of sleepwalking through the movie. I was kind of waiting for it to get interesting and it never really did. And then when the characters reached the end of their arc and had to acknowledge each other's perspectives, it kind of felt rote. It felt obligatory. It felt boring. It didn't feel like anything interesting was happening. And I think it absolutely could have. It's kind of what I'm trying to say. You absolutely could have taken this to a place where there's more going on, where it's playing with the formula more, where it's taking a step further. Where you mentioned earlier the generational angle. And I think that is absolutely something that could have been done. Like one of the things that's kind of happening in the political discourse at the moment and the cultural discourse is how every generation hates every other generation. And the other generation is kind of the reason everything is terrible and everything is falling apart. Kind of thing. Like that's a sentiment that's out there. And now you have a body swap stories where you are shuffling around 3 generations and you can't do anything interesting with that. Like it doesn't have to be something heavy. It doesn't have to be something deeply profound. But I'm sure there's potential to do something.
I think the biggest thing is that it just wasn't sincere in what it was trying to do. In terms of everything was like we mentioned before, just surface level and played for laughs, and at no point was it sincere in trying to offer up a perspective or tell a story of a specific perspective that felt real and felt any real empathy for in that. And again, what we talked about was the lack of heart in the movie, and I think that mainly comes from the whole being insincere about everything in this movie, really and truthfully. So yeah, I think I was like similar to you, where you're kind of just waiting for something good to happen, and it just never does.
And just compared to the concert scene in the end of the first movie, where they have to work together and they have to get over themselves and have to kind of find a solution that works for everybody. And you cannot resolve the problem by just one person insisting on their way. That certainly happens, but it's not. It feels rushed and it feels like we're ticking boxes. I think that is why it doesn't work. One thing I did want to bring up is that this is like a legacy sequel, and we've been getting a lot of those this year. And my question to you is, where does it rank among legacy sequels for you? How does it stack up against other legacy sequels, in your opinion?
I think where I give it positives is, again, it tried to, similar to what Final Destination did, where it tried to one up what it done previously and kind of give you something that you're familiar with, but give it like add a little bit more to it. So with Final Destination, it was a whole, the victims have now had children, and how does that affect sort of the sort of the line of death, or sort of the chain of death from the inciting incident. And in this, it's adding additional people to the whole body swap element of it. I think this one has its difficulties because I just don't think I'm like the target audience for this anymore. So it it's fighting a bigger battle for me. I think in terms of what it did and what it served, like I don't hate this as much as some of the other legacy sequels that we have had, but I just don't think it done enough to really, one, justify its existence, because I don't think it's got anything to say. I don't think there's really a point to it. So for me, it doesn't really justify its existence. And two, it doesn't leave you feeling or wanting for more. I think it's like this one compared to other legacy sequels is a little bit more difficult to talk about, just because other ones there's a level of interest, or there's some type of interest in the story, whereas this one I was okay never getting another Freaky Friday movie.
So this is at the break-even point at the moment. So budget is in the low 40s, like about $43 million, and box office is like 113. So this is in the process of making a profit, which means we will probably get a sequel to this. I think in comparison to other legacy sequels, I think this at least understands the appeal of the franchise and of the first movie. One thing I was impressed by is that it gets the entire cast back together. The only one who doesn't show up until the very end is the little brother, who is at the wedding, but he's otherwise is not present. But everybody else came back for this, which is interesting. The problem with a lot of legacy sequels is that they just simply they can't replicate the appeal of the first movie or of the original, and they just do something that kind of is vaguely similar, but it doesn't have the same charm, and it often misunderstands what was appealing about the original in the first place. And so it feels very tired, and you're seeing people like 20 years later or 30 years later. So everybody is older and more tired, and it doesn't have whatever made the original work. And so I think that is a big reason for why so many legacy sequels just simply do not work. And I think the ones that do work kind of iterate on the formula a little bit. So I think Final Destination this year was one of the shining examples of how to do it, because it understands what is cool about Final Destination, but then it also builds on the formula. It's not simply rehashing what people did 20 years ago, but it also acknowledges its fan base, right? And I think this definitely appeals to the core audience, right? So if we're gonna sit here and say, oh, it doesn't understand what's good about Freaky Friday, like that's clearly not the case, right? Because people, like the people who are the inbuilt audience, are liking this, right? But I feel like it's kind of in the middle. So it understands the basic idea of what it needs to do, right? It certainly has the structure of what it needs to do, right? Because the plot, like if you just write down the plot points, this whole thing about realizing the other person's point of view and realizing what you need to do right by the other person, that's kind of in there. It's just not sincere, and it doesn't have any heart, and it doesn't have any kind of emotional weight. And I think that is more about tone than anything else. But it at least understands that should be there. It just doesn't do a very good job at actually making that work. So for that reason, I think it's kind of somewhere in the middle. All this needed was a smarter script that had more fun and put more thought into the like what situations come out of this, and don't play everything as a joke. That's kind of the other part of it. But none of this is like fatally flawed. There's nothing fundamentally stupid about doing like another Freaky Friday 20 years later. I don't think. There's no reason for why this had to be quite this bad. Just as one example, Anna and Eric go to the immigration interview, right? First of all, I'm a little bit confused why Eric has to immigrate if they're going to move to London. At first, I thought it was her immigration interview. That actually could have been interesting, having an American go through the system with the Home Office. That could have been interesting. Like I don't think I've seen that in an American movie before. That could have been something interesting where you put the American in the awkward situation of having to justify yourself, and your life, like how the rest of your life goes, is kind of in the balance based on the whims of some bureaucrat, right? So missed opportunity there, and still don't understand why Eric is the one getting the passport. But okay. But then also the immigration officer is a complete joke, where she's constantly hits on Eric because of how hot he is, and then she just keeps singing these songs that she has in common with Eric. And it's like, why did you have to do this? Like, why could you not have played this straight? And the humor comes from Harper having to BS her way through this interview, like trying to tank it by accidentally saying the right things or whatever. Why did you have to turn that into a joke?
Yeah, and actually, that was actually one of the scenes where I actually liked Harper's kind of realization about her mother, and like, no, it was I actually don't think, no, that was when she kind of realized how much she cared about her mum, more
That's
so
where
than
she
like,
realizes how
yeah,
much Eric loves her mother, because he knows
yeah,
all.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
she keeps trying to set him up for failure, asking him these hyper detailed questions. I don't remember what it was like, but like favorite this, or you know, the first time we did that, and he always knows the answer. And then she actually runs out of questions, and he just keeps going and shows what an amazing guy he is and how thoughtful and committed and devoted he is. And it makes her feel really bad. Like that was funny enough. Like that was the joke. Like we didn't need a singing immigration officer to top it off. Like the humor comes from Harper flailing around and realizing like how wrong she is.
Especially where you had a situation like that earlier in the movie where they both meet for the first time at the girls' school, and actually that time the person that brought them in, or was like the teacher essentially, was funny in that scene where she's kind of realizing that they have like some type of chemistry, and she's like making jokes about, oh, I'm single too, and like should we make reservations and stuff like that. That was funny. The second time around, it just didn't hit the same.
Yeah, and speaking of teachers, this is I don't remember if it was the same teacher, but there was one teacher, the one who breaks up the food fight, who is completely serious the entire way through. She's the funniest person in the movie. You know what I mean?
Same teacher, yeah, same teacher,
Is it the same teacher? Yeah, but
same
like
one,
in
yeah.
most scenes, she's completely serious and just has no time for these shenanigans. And as a result, she's the most human character, and she's also the most entertaining one because she has to put up with this nonsense from these teenagers. So again, like that's like a little glimpse of what the movie could have if more of the movie had been like this, where characters are serious, but the humor comes from the misunderstandings or from people's shortcomings. That would have been a much different movie.
Yeah, so I don't know if I've got anything else to add to that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think like there are details we could get into. One thing I was kind of refreshed by is how much of a spine Eric has, where he outright says, "No, I try to make this work. Clearly, it isn't working, and we have to draw consequences from that." And then he actually almost goes through with it. Ryan is just completely passive. Like he checked out years ago, and he just lets Tess and Anna do their thing, and he does not care anymore and doesn't have the energy for this kind of nonsense. But Eric just actually is a person and actually has like thoughts and principles. And I was actually impressed that the
And
movie
actually,
did this.
yeah, because I was gonna say, typically the like portrayal of male, especially in like female movies, is of them being a little bit more weak, pathetic. This is where like Hollywood confuses me, because like for the female gaze, they know that they want someone that's like strong and like, the ideal man, the perfect man who's like, fit, in shape, has like good career going for them, and this and the other. They know that that's what females are attracted to, but then in other movies they have this need to handicap the males to make the females in the movie look better. So it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, even in 2025, we've not figured out how to just have everybody in a relationship just be a person with agency and opinions. Like whenever it happens, it's rare. Like it's notable. And like Eric actually saying, no, like I guess this isn't going to work. Like I'm not going to put up with this for the rest of my life. Stood out. It was last. I was not expecting it. And like he's not even like unreasonable about it, right? He's not even selfish about it. It's just like he's had the patience of a saint for like the first 90 minutes of the movie, and then at some point he just has enough. The movie is more realistic because of it, right? Like at some point, like everybody has their breaking point, and the fact that Eric has one and he reaches it, and he acts like a reasonable, like he doesn't lash out. He's just disappointed because he wanted to make this work, and for whatever reason, it's not working, and he has to like he's pretty reasonable and mature, and he's justified about it, right? About how he reacts, and there's kind of tragedy in this that these wacky hijinks have basically destroyed a life in that sense, right? Or at least like had an impact on one. That was kind of one of the few moments where I cared because that's where somebody was behaving like a person.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with what you said there. I think you summed that up pretty well. Cool.
All right, shall we move to last words?
I don't know whether I'm being a bit too harsh on the movie or not, but for me, I could have done without. I don't think it needed to be made. I don't think there was enough ideas about how to execute this properly and how to sort of really tell a sincere story. I don't think it really kind of wanted to explore its themes, which is like kind of like generations and stuff like that, really well. I think everything was pretty much a joke, which is a shame because something like this has like a high potential of really teaching each other about the challenges and the struggles that people go through. Again, whether it's like mother and daughter, but in this movie, whether it's like across different generations, and I just kind of don't think it was handled that well. Biggest sin being a comedy and me not finding it funny. It's like you're sort of fighting a losing battle there. So, but I will say I can see why people would like the movie. I can see how people can go into this and kind of see what they got and enjoy it. So I don't want to like kind of bash on anyone's fun. If you kind of enjoyed it, then it's your prerogative to do so. And I can see why you would enjoy it. But for me, it was fighting a losing battle and it didn't win. So for that reason, I'll give it a 4 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit more positive about it than you are. I think this absolutely had the potential to be interesting, be funny. All it needed is a smarter script, a little bit of humanity, just a little bit more creativity. I think all the pieces are there. The generational aspect of it, the intercultural aspect of it, all of that could have been the basis for like the next iteration of the formula, and that would have been enough to for the movie to justify its existence. It just needed to not play everything as a joke. It needed some actual heart, and it needed a little bit of creativity and not be so over the top all the time. So for that reason, that's a 5 out of 9. It's not the worst movie I've seen this year, but it's far from good enough.
I have one question before we kind of wrap it up. And actually, it was just kind of like to the point that you were making there. Do you think that this could have been better if we didn't have the legacy characters come back and actually it was okay, the first movie is about a mother and daughter not understanding each other, and then this one was maybe across different generations not understanding each other, and then maybe in future you could have had one about like you know different races like needing to understand each other and so kind of so on and so forth. You can kind of see where there's loads of divides within society, and it could have been tackled differently in each of the movies. I don't know. I don't know how that would have played or whatever. It's just like if there's like the theme of trying to have empathy and trying to sort of bridge the gap between someone of a differing experience, they could have maybe like explore, and probably it would have got tired after a while anyways. But yeah, I don't know if that was a possibility.
Oh, I think that's absolutely possible, and I want to see the social media reaction to like a white family and a black family switching places, and then see how that goes. Like surely nothing bad could come out of that. But you're right. Like the formula has a lot of potential to do more interesting things than pretty much doing the same thing again as the first movie. And I think that's part of why it's so underwhelming. It's just overall just disappointing. Like I walked into this like fully on board with the kind of movie this could have been, and I can got a bunch of enjoyment out of the one from the 70s or 80s, and then the first one as well. And this one, I was totally on board with what this movie was promising. I just don't think it fulfilled that promise.
I guess with that, we've reached the end of the episode. As always, we appreciate your support. We thank you for working with us, for checking us out. As always, if you liked what you heard today and you enjoyed our discussion, you should probably tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we were chatting a bunch of nonsense, you should probably tell an enemy. We are the Iverstone Podcast. See you later.
Bye bye.